And for more on this, we're joined by Mikael Valtersson. He's a military analyst and former officer with the Swedish Army. Welcome to the programme. Now, at the summit, NATO reaffirmed its commitment to increase defence spending to 5% of their GDP. How realistic do you think that is for European members?
Well, not for all members. Some of the countries will undoubtedly reach the goal, especially the 3.5% that must go to direct military spending. But today, the majority of the countries has only around 2%, and several of those are not going to increase it very much, especially Spain. So we have a big conflict between the United States and Spain about military spending. But the countries in the northeastern and northern Europe will probably reach at least the 3.5 target. But there are also another 1.5% that can go to investment in industry and infrastructure. And of course, most of the countries will use those money for that kind of investment, because they can have a dual use, also use in the civilian economy.
And companies focused on missiles, drones and military software appear to be attracting the most interest at the moment. Why have investors become more selective within the defence sector?
Well, as you have said, there has been a very huge rise in stock prices. So many of the countries are probably overvalued, especially when you look on what kind of weaponry you need to buy. Earlier, there were no selection between the countries, but the companies. But if you look on the war in Ukraine and also in Iran, you see that air defense assets and drones, and of course also missiles, are the main weaponry. For example, tanks and armored personnel carriers and weapons like that has lost much of its value. So in a high-priced market for shares, they tend to concentrate on those companies that produce things that they are believing to be the main focus on military investments. And we saw it also now in Ankara that there are talks about 40 billion to drones, and also an initiative from the UK with about 40 billion to long-range precision strike missiles. So those are the main focus for the military and also for investors.
Geopolitical tensions are, of course, driving this momentum. But if the war in Ukraine were to de-escalate, would that change the investment outlook for the sector?
Well, partly. But, for example, we have been talking about the Trump trillion in investments in military matters, and that has nothing to do with Ukraine. For Europe is going to send about 60 billion euros to Ukraine in military support this year, but that's just a small part of rearmament in Europe. So the majority of investments will continue, but of course there might be a slight dip in interest. But we see also from the war in Iran that the US has depleted much of its inventory when it comes to several kinds of missiles. So in the most important areas, missiles, drones, surface-to-air assets, those will be very interesting also in the future.
Mikael Valtersson, former Swedish Army officer and military analyst, thank you very much for joining us.